Uh, sent her a message.
You, Steve, I've just sent you a message.
Where?
Is it on the chat, Derek, or do you mean by
Oh, I
phone?
see. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Thank you. Yes, Derek. If you'd like to, I was about to, but you do it. You know him better than me. Yeah. Let's
Okay.
start with that.
Okay. I think some of you will already know this news, sad news, but Ian Russell sadly died yesterday.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know him, Ian was professor at Aberdeen University and former director of the Elphinstone Institute, but maintained his deep interest in English traditional song, and particularly the carols of South Yorkshire and Derbyshire. Nothing more to say. Very sad news.
Yeah.
Former editor of the journal, folk music journal.
Yeah. He was always very supportive of everybody, including me. He was at the first meeting of the TSF when we were setting it up. He was one of the first to say he'd come. He was the first one to chip in some money for the ballad partners when that was suggested. He's always been there. Ian. So yeah, if I had to say something, I was going to say that when somebody writes the history of folk song, folklore research from the 70s onwards up to now, most of us will be footnotes, but Ian will be in the middle of it. He'll be mentioned all the time. So yeah, he will be missed.
I would say his PhD thesis is amazingly useful because it's a very old PhD thesis, but it's full of absolutely wonderful stuff that for me is the only place I'm able to find some of it.
Yeah,
it's so thorough.
Yeah, exactly, and that was a long time ago. He's had a whole career since.
Yeah, but in a sense, he spent his whole life adding to that PhD thesis because it was the same sort of area of Yorkshire singing traditions in Yorkshire, changed and adapted, brought in the carols and so on. Yeah.
Oh. So this this meeting is dedicated to Ian's memory. So, ladies and gentlemen, the parish news. 14th of June is our next scheduled meeting date, but we have no speakers. So either somebody comes out the woodwork in the next couple of days, or we bill it as a discussion, a free-for-all discussion type meeting. We haven't had one of them for a long time, or we cancel. It would normally be the last of this season anyway. We don't normally have these meetings in July and August. So if anybody wants to email with some ideas of what we could discuss, then please do. If not, have a look on our web page or emails on TradSong and stuff. We may have to cancel if we have nothing to meet for. However, the Manchester conference that we had last month, I suppose it was, Women and Folk Song, was excellent. We all had a really good time, and the sessions are on YouTube, thanks to Martin who recorded them. Our next event after the June meeting, 26th of August, the Roy Palmer lecture, Katie Howson at Whitby Folk Week. That's sponsored by TSF, amongst other people. 10th of October, we have our conference in Leeds. The subject is traditional song in the northern counties of England. So look on the website. The call for papers has already gone out. We've had 2 papers in so far, so we're already getting there. But if you've got something to contribute, please do. So that's 10th of October in Leeds. The other news is that the Ballad Partners have 2 new books out since the last time we spoke, I think. We've got Peter Snape's book on Anne Gilchrist, the collector and all-round good person, Anne Gilchrist, and Arthur Nevitt's History of the Folk Song Society. Both available from the Ballad Partners website, the Ballad Partners website. I think that's all the parish news today. We've got two excellent papers, which I'm looking forward to both of them. We got Martin first on child and bearing gold, or the other way around, bearing gold and child. So would you like to start, Martin?
Yeah.
Right, we have that. Yeah, that's looking good.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for turning up for this, the Parson and the Professor. In June 1890, Francis Child, a professor of literature at Harvard University and an acknowledged expert on the traditional ballads of England and Scotland, received a letter. Dear Sir, I've long known your book of English and Scottish ballads, and did not know till the other day, when in the British Museum, that a new and admirable edition was in progress. I've sent you a copy of the 3 first parts of my Songs of the West. I've been engaged mainly in collecting the old melodies in Devon and Cornwall, but in so doing have collected the old ballads and songs as well. In publishing for the general public, it's not been possible to give all the ballads, nor all such as we do give in quite their original form, as some have a freeness in morals that will not suit the pianoforte. Now, I've been rather puzzled what to do with the originals, but now I've seen your book, my difficulty ceases. I will send them to you. Now, the writer was the Reverend Sabin Baring-Gould, who, from his tiny parish in the west of England, had produced a steady stream of books on a wide range of topics, as well as having become the first large-scale collector of English folk songs. The two men were already known to each other, as they'd corresponded about an error in one of Baring-Gould's books 10 years earlier. Child was perhaps a little surprised by Baring-Gould's letter, as it was probably the first time that he'd been given evidence that ballads were being collected from living singers in England. Over the next 3 years, Baring-Gould sent Child at least 17 letters and more than 50 song texts, together with information about his sources and his thoughts about the songs and his singers. In the advertisement to Part 7 of English and Scottish Popular Ballads, from now on I'll abbreviate this to ESPB, which was published in October 1890, Child writes, "The Reverend S. Baring-Gould has done me the great favour of furnishing me with copies of traditional ballads and songs taken down by him in the west of England. By this date, Child was more than halfway through the publication of his mammoth work, but, as we will see in more detail later, he included several of the ballads that Baring-Gould had sent in the later parts of his book. The collection of letters and song texts sent by Baring-Gould can now be found in the Houghton Library of Harvard University, which holds Child's papers related to balladry. After Child's death in 1896, his pupil and successor, George Lyman Kittredge, took on the task of putting these into order, associating the songs wherever possible to the letter relating to them. His handwritten explanation of his reasoning forms part of the manuscript collection, and he assigned the rest of the letters to an appendix. Now, I first became aware of these manuscripts in May 1995, when Baring-Gould's great-granddaughter, Muriel Ullman, gave me a set of photocopies of the manuscript taken from the microfilm made by the Harvard Library. At this time, I had the bigger task of indexing and transcribing the other manuscripts that we discovered in 1992, so I only drew up a list of song titles. When, in 1998, the microfiche edition of the Baring Gould song manuscripts was published, we included the images taken from the microfilm with that simple list as an index. Like many of Baring Gould's manuscripts, the letters to child are difficult to read, as you can see from the example on the left of the picture. His handwriting is always difficult, but the task is made harder when the writing has bled through to the other side of the letter sheet. While Sian and I had managed to transcribe most of the letters, some things still eluded us. To complete the transcription, I needed to spend some time with the original document, so we visited the Houghton Library in 2009 and then again in 2011. Seeing the original documents enabled us to complete the transcription. We also discovered that after Kittredge had reorganized the manuscript, he'd added new page numbers in red pencil, which had not been visible in the photocopier. This explains the odd pagination that we've been seeing. When the complete collection of Baring Gould's manuscripts was added to the Vaughan Williams Memorial Library's digital archive, it was decided, based on my experience with the original documents, that we would commission a high-quality colour scan of the collection of letters to child. Funding to do so was raised in the USA by Merrill Almond and other Baring Gould family members, and this went online in 2011. The manuscript collection contains 14 letters and 2 postcards from Baring Gould to child, sent between June 1880 and November 1893. There are also 44 texts of ballads and songs that Baring Gould had collected from 23 singers, as well as 19 song texts copied from printed sources. Baring Gould also include references to other sources. In his letter in June 1890, Baring Gould had promised that he would send child some of the ballads that he'd collected. He'd sent the first 3 volumes of his book, Songs and Ballads of the West, with the letter, and this gave child immediate access to 82 items. In the June letter, Baring Gould had listed some of the ballads he had collected, but not yet published. In a postscript, he says, "I will send you all you want of the above. Songs, I suppose you do not want." And this raises the question, what is a ballad? The 2 men would have answered that question differently, and neither man ever put his definition in writing for us. I believe that Baring Gould, simply speaking, subscribed to the idea that a ballad was a song that told a story and included songs from broadsides. Child, meanwhile, seems to have expected something with ancient origins that matched his intuitive sense of what a ballad was. Baring Gould sent Child what he described as a budget of copies the following month. It's not possible to identify all the items that were included in the budget with certainty, though we can identify the order they were sent in with more certainty. Kittredge made a valiant attempt to put the pages of the manuscript in the likely order in which they were received by Child, and in the table shown here, I put all the ballads in the manuscript in that likely order. The title Child used is given first with Baring Gould's title in brackets. There is, though, another indicator of items that were included in the budget, which can be found in Baring Gould's own manuscripts. What we now call his working notebooks were originally fair copies of the songs that he'd heard. In Working Notebook 4, several of the songs have a penciled note in the top corner saying, "Sent to Child." These are the 12 titles in my table which have an asterisk against them. Here you can see the entry in that notebook for Henry Martin. Now, Baring Gould used this notebook until about May 1891, when I believe he started to compile what we now call the personal copy manuscript, which is the most complete record of his collection. In the passage that I read at the start, Baring Gould referred to a freeness in morals that will not suit the pianoforte, by which he meant the Victorian drawing room. In this slide, you can see the list of songs again, and here are the songs of questionable morality, lettered in red, though none are outright filthy. They include, for example, The Jolly Sportsman, in which a crafty young woman betters the man who made her pregnant by placing the baby in the basket of cherries that she sold to him. This was one of the songs that Baring Gould collected soon after his project began, and this illustration is a rare example of his field notation. The note in brackets beside the title reads, "Nasty one, to be rewritten." He had a broadside of it in his collection. Child, I am sure, would much rather have consigned it to the dunghill. Baring Gould told Child in a letter sent on the 23rd of August 1890 that, "At first I didn't think the words were worth reproduction, as they were, I fancied, broadside ballads. It was only after a time, when I compared them with the broadside, that I found that our versions were in several cases superior in poetry and fuller in verses." And this goes part of the way to understanding why he took some of the editing decisions that he made in the first year and a half of collecting. I'm not going to go, come on, you can do it. Thank you. I'm not going to go into detail about Baring Gould's editing of songs in this paper, as that is the subject of a current project which should become the talk I will give at Whitby in August, which has the provisional title, Baring Gould's Naughty Bits. He certainly cut out verses to fit the pages for songs and ballads of the West, but more problematically, in the early years of collecting, he tinkered with songs to improve them or to reconstruct them from partial texts. This can be seen from his working notebooks and was usually done for songs that he intended to publish. Though at the time he was using the notebooks as a primary record of the songs he had collected, they were also a sandbox where he could play with the words. Unfortunately, he sometimes forgot that this was what he had done. And while he had made it clear to Child that some of his text had been edited, he was not specific about what he had done with individual songs. In the case of The Gypsy Countess, for example, he'd convinced himself that the song had a first part, which described the Earl marrying the gypsy girl. This belief was based on having seen the broadside, The Gypsy Countess, which he took to be a remnant of an earlier ballad, but which was in fact a composition from the mid-19th century, written by Mrs. Crawford, with music by Stephen Glover. His tinkering can be seen in successive iterations in his notebooks, but in his working notebook too, he makes it clear that the part one he has published is a conjectural reconstruction. In this case, Child did not use Baring Gould's texts, though he gave a description of it in the entry for the Gypsy Laddie in Part 7 of ESPB, published in October 1890. Unfortunately, Baring Gould did not give Child any warning that another ballad included in the budget, The Brown Girl, had also undergone a lengthy process of tinkering. He'd heard a song from John Woodrich that he called Pretty Dorothy, which he thought was rather like Barbara Allen in its story. We now believe that this was a version of Sally and Her True Love Billy, or The Sailor from Dover, which appeared on several broadsides. He also discovered a ballad, The Brown Girl, or The Cruel Nymph, in chapbooks in the British Museum, and decided that the former was a degraded version of the latter, and then put the two together to make the version of The Brown Girl that he sent to Child, who published it as number 295 in Part 9 of ESPB. Steve Gardam studied this matter in 1898 and made an exhaustive comparison between the versions. He drew the conclusion that Baring Gould was hoaxing Child. I do not believe this to be the case based on the correspondence as a whole. I do think, though, that Baring Gould was very careless. Having committed to sending Child some ballads, the so-called budget of songs, he seems to have picked up his current notebook of songs, Working Notebook 4, and copied a dozen or so items out, without, frankly, a lot of thought. It's particularly surprising that the selection in the budget had mostly been included in the 3 volumes of Songs and Ballads of the West that he'd already sent. But what he sent to Child later on was much better considered and explained. But the damage had been done. The brown girl, as portrayed in ESPB, is inauthentic. Let's now have a look at the use Child made of the material Baring Gould sent to him. Here again is the list of songs that Baring Gould sent to Child, and here the titles in yellow are songs that Child gave in full in ESPB. Those in green are songs that were not included in full, but which Child mentioned in the book. And here's a list of songs from the Harvard manuscripts that appeared in full in ESPB. And you'll see that the first of the songs actually appeared in Part 8, published in 1892. This was Baring Gould's version of Henry Martin, collected from Matthew Baker of Lou Down, which became version A of number 250 in ESPB. Here, Child has reproduced Baker's version accurately. Baring Gould had already published Henry Martin as number 53 in the 3rd volume of Songs and Ballads of the West. When the notes of the songs for the whole work were published in the 4th part of 1891, he reports that Professor Child, editing the British ballad, informs me that he's heard a version sung in the USA by an immigrant, and he called the pirate Andrew Borby. This is the only confirmed indication of a response from Child to Baring Gould. If you counted the songs on the previous slide, you'll have noticed that I mentioned 8, and here there are 9. The Crafty Farmer, Child 283, appears in volume 9, but was not in the Harvard manuscript. Child has, in this case, taken Baring Gould's text of the Silly Old Man from the pages of Songs and Ballads of the West, rather from manuscript, and inserted it as version E of the Crafty Farmer, number 283. The lengthy section of additions and corrections that completes Part 9 bring in 3 more complete texts from Baring Gould, a version of Child number 12, Lord Randall is Jackie My Son, which was sent to Baring Gould in 1892 by Miss Frances Adams of Plymouth, so as a late addition to the manuscripts he sent to Child. Sorry, I got that wrong. This was not included in the collection of manuscripts sent to Child, and Baring Gould didn't publish it until 1895, when it was printed in A Garland of Country Song, with a lengthy note referencing Child. And this suggests that there was at least one letter from that period that has not been saved. I've not previously mentioned that Child had already included a song taken from Baring Gould in ESPB before the correspondence began. Child had discovered the Golden Ball in the appendix that Baring Gould had written for William Henderson's Folklore of the Northern Counties in 1866. This was a canterfabler that he'd learned from girls attending his evening classes in Yorkshire when he was a curate in the 1860s. Child has extracted the verses and assigned them to Made Free from the Gallows. number 95 as version H. In the additions and corrections in Part 9, he added a version sent to Baring Gould by Mrs. Batchelor from Cornwall as an additional variant. It's now time to start to draw this to a close, and it's appropriate to ask what value these documents have. Like all Baring Gould's work, we must be aware of his editing practices, particularly in the early years of his work on folk songs. In fact, these documents shine additional light on these practices because comparisons can be made with versions of the same songs in other manuscripts. But the real value of this collection, in my opinion, lies in the letters rather than in the ballads. The letters were an alert to Child that songs and ballads were being actively collected in England from traditional singers. As well as making Child aware of his own work, Baring Gould introduced him to three other collectors active at that time: Lucy Broadwood, William Barrett, and Marianne Mason. In the case of Mason, he went to some trouble to arrange for Child to receive a copy of her book. This turned out to be useful, as Child added the full text of Mason's There Was a Lady in the West as a version E of Riddle's wisely expounded #1 in ESPB. In his later letters, Baring Gould starts to introduce his singers by name, and An Old Hedger, for example, becomes James Parsons. The letters do contain additional context about Baring Gould's songs and his singers, 23 of whom contributed songs in this set of manuscripts. An interesting observation by Baring Gould is that men are less inclined to remember ballads than are women. It's perhaps less clear what Baring Gould got out of the exercise, not least because we don't have the letters that Child wrote to him. What motivated him to start the correspondence? He may have hoped that Child would take an interest in his work and promote it in the USA. At this time, Songs and Ballads of the West was not selling particularly well, and he may have seen an opportunity for additional sales. But he may just have been trying to help a fellow scholar. There was one tangible benefit. In his letter dated 23rd of August 1890, he asks Child whether he can buy ESPB at cost price, as the cost is rather heavy. On 18th of October, he thanks Child for his kindness and says, "I've written to Miss Stevens and hope to get your most valuable book." This is Baring Gould's copy of ESPB. I had an opportunity to examine it several years ago, and you can see that it is still in its paper wrappers. What is less obvious is that it is largely uncut. He's clearly made little use of it. If you wish to look at the Harvard manuscript yourself, there are two ways of viewing it online. There's a copy on the Harvard Library website, which is presented in such a way that you can scroll through the pages, though it has the disadvantage that it has no index. Or you can look on the Vaughan Williams Memorial Library website, where there is a better list of contents, but you have to select each page from that list individually rather than scrolling through them. I am planning to put our complete transcription of the collection of my website, the complete transcription of the collection on my website, sbgsongs.org, shortly. So thank you for listening. Please get in touch if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Excellent, as always. Fascinating stuff. Can I ask about the letters from Child? And you say that they haven't survived. Have other letters other letters that Baring Gould received from other people? Did he keep letters in general? You know, are there hundreds of letters from other people? Or is that something he didn't bother with?
Not huge numbers of letters from that kind of correspondence. It tends to get a bit random, and we've relied quite a lot on other sources for the letters that were sent to Baring Gould, and the letters he sent as well. So, no, in general, the letters sent to Baring Gould are pretty rare items, but there are some in his collection. Tends to be more about letters from publishers and things like that, which have their own uses.
Yeah, business letters.
Yeah.
So maybe they'll turn up.
Unlikely, but you never know.
Somewhere or other.
Yeah.
And I love the phrase unsuitable for the pianoforte. I'm going to use that phrase. You know, that really does sum it up, doesn't it? Do we have any questions for anybody? Anybody got their hand up? No. Speak now. You did make one mistake in your talk, Martin. You said that Steve Gardam did his thing in 1898.
Yes, that was a bit early, wasn't it?
Yeah, we've all taken note of that. You know, it's us proofreaders. Anyway, nobody else wants to say anything. Thanks again, Martin. We'll move on to Stephen. Stephen is going to talk to us about Henry Burstow. Yeah, we have that. That's good.
Okay, you have the correct view. Right. Okay. I just my screen. Okay. Well, once again, thanks for the invitation to speak and to speak on a topic not to do with the Isle of Man, which probably is a surprise to me and probably likely a surprise to you as well. So I'm going to talk about Henry Burstow and the sort of resources to be found amongst the William Elbury manuscripts concerning Henry Burstow. And because I'm not speaking about the Isle of Man, we don't have to have that inevitable first slide showing you where the Isle of Man is, but we need an inevitable first slide perhaps showing you where Horsham is. And you can see it sits here in the west of Sussex. And you can see here a wonderful view here from the Ordnance Survey map of 1896, just one of these very small towns in Sussex, sort of dispersed settlements around the particular place. But there is a Manx connection, there's always got to be a Manx connection, and here's a particular letter here from W.H. Gill writing to his cousin Annie Gill here in 1912 about how Gill, when he retired from the post office in London, decided not to move to the Isle of Man, but moved to Angmering, where his daughters were living, and he moved into the White House there and continued collecting, or started collecting in Sussex, and came across Henry Burstow himself. And as I mentioned, there, his verbal memory is phenomenal. He has a repertoire of 400 songs. You only have to quote the first line of any one of these, and off he goes like a phonograph. And the difficulty is to stop him before he comes to the end, sometimes the bitter end. So anyway, so there's a Manx connection. So I can, this is, yeah. So who is Henry Burstow? For those who perhaps don't really know who he is, well, these are some wonderful photographs of him. I think you'll be perhaps familiar with the photograph on the right. It accompanies the latest reprint of the Reminiscences. The one on the left you've perhaps not seen before. That's from Bell News. That's from 1891, which is say this is there's a whole set of resources from his life as a bell ringer that I will be mentioning as well to bring into play. But to say, in this particular period, he had two reputations. He was a reputation as a folk singer, as you can see here from the Bexhill-on-Sea Observer here from 1907. He has a marvelous memory for songs, and his repertory comprises no fewer than 412. He remembers both melody and words of any songs he hears once. And he also, as I mentioned, same year, speaks to his reputation as a bell ringer as well. He's been. And he was never said to have missed a single Sunday from Horsham Parish Church, and he rang the bells for 65 years. And is once again mentioned here about his reputation as a folk singer as well. He only has to hear both the tunes and the words. He's a bootmaker by trade, as it said here, and also mentions too here that he was also a watercolor illustrator. He did pen and ink sketches as well. He was also a poet as well. There's some of his poetry has survived that is in Horsham. But he also turns up as well, and this is from 1912. This is a competition between bell ringers. And this is the bell ringer from Horsham here, who sort of composed his spiel to win this bell ringing competition. Actually mentions Henry Burstow here. Oh yea, I come from ancient Horsham town. I cannot in 2 minutes speak to you. If into all these facts you'd like to look, you'd better buy old Henry Burstow's book. The greatest man the town has ever produced am I. And this, of course, is what he is renowned for. This is what he's most noted for, is the Reminiscences of Horsham, published here in 1911. And on the left-hand side, that is his signature. This is from the copy that's in the British Library, has his signature in it as well. So this is what brings his fame. This is why he's of interest to us, because this does have an account not just of his bell ringing, but just account of his songs and a list of his songs, as we all know, this list of 420 songs that he was said to have known. And one of the, thanks to the sort of digitization of the newspapers, I think we all know that it brings up all sorts of little snippets and all sorts of little extra details here. This is one here from the Daily Telegraph from 1965, which is not really a paper you'd think of turning to for help with Henry Burstow or folk song in general. And there's just a mention here of someone here who remembers him coming around. I well remember in 1912, this patriarchal figure in his 86th year coming into the countryside round Horsham to sell copies of his reminiscences, which make very interesting reading today and which were printed for him by local public subscription. So I just like this little extra detail that we get about Burstow from such a particular source. But figure I'm talking about today is William Albery. And here's the man himself outside his shop. He inherited the family business, and the family business was that of a saddler, but it was everything as well. This is the world of pre-mechanized agriculture. So not only did they make saddles, they made ropes. They also made canvas coverings. They made rick covers for haystacks and so on. So whatever you wanted that was made out of canvas, whatever you wanted that was made out of rope, William Albery would supply it for you. Rather, the family supplied it for you as well. And this is the man himself. He was a member of the Horsham Recreational Band, which was founded in 1902. They were known as the Rex, and they also had another name came on there as the Rex. They were seen as a lesser band compared to the Horsham Brass Band, and so they later changed the name to the Horsham Recreational Silver Band. But they did provide Henry Burstow with his one and only public appearance. He appears here in 1908. With the prominence given lately to folklore, the band made an innovation that greatly pleased the audience. This was none other than the first appearance in public of Mr. Henry Burstow, Horsham's grand old songster and bell ringer, who is 82 years of age and has a marvelous repertoire of folk songs. So in this particular period, he was well known as a bell ringer and also equally well known as a folk singer as well. And this is the three songs that he sung. He sung Bonaparte's Retreat from Moscow, The Gallant Poachers, and The Oak Table. He sang once again in public in 1912. Well, that's the only other mention we have of him singing ever again in public, but the song is not recorded. And okay, moving on now to sort of looking at where William Albery and where the William Albery manuscripts come in and where the William Albery manuscripts are, is they are held by Horsham Museum and Art Gallery. When I first inquired about any resources that they had at Horsham about Henry Burstow, I was just sent a very short list of material, which was basically his poems and artwork. And the gold dust, and it is gold dust, there's no doubt about that, is in the William Albery manuscripts. And it was only by reading Henry Burstow's entry in the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography that I realized that they've just simply mentioned the William Albery manuscripts. There was only when I had a chance to visit Horsham, incidentally on the way to the Isle of Man, because Horsham is next to Gatwick, it's 10 minutes on the bus, that I had a chance to have a look at the William Albery manuscripts. And when you realize that William Albery is the figure behind the reminiscences, then this becomes obvious where to go and look for the particular material. It's an extensive collection of material. I must admit, the manuscripts don't all relate to Burstow, because after working on the reminiscences, he seemed to have got this second life as a historian and started working on the history of Horsham and the history of Sussex. So some of these manuscript classes cover his other material, but nevertheless, there is an enormous amount of material that relates to Henry Burstow. There is a hand list available, and part of the hand list here is remarkably, it is catalogued down to item level. I mean, someone has done some really Stakhanovite effort into this as well. And even if you can just look, perhaps you can look down straight away. I mean, I think people can see there, you've already got a mention there of Lucy Broadwood and so on. So you can see some of the particular material that is going to be found amongst the Albury manuscripts. But, oh, I'm doing well for time. I'm doing well for time. I sort of have split it down into these sort of 5 areas, I would say, of particular interest. And I think this is in order perhaps of interest to the audience here. First of all, there is the list of songs. We know that the Reminiscences has the list of the 420 songs. This is the original list. We also then have the material that relates to the publication of the Reminiscence. It seems almost as the complete archive is there. There's even delivery notes for copies of the Reminiscences being shipped to William Albury. It's down to that particular level. We also have the manuscript of the Reminiscences as well. We also too have the account book for the benevolent fund that was set up to support Henry Burstow because he fell upon hard times, as did many of these other bell ringers as well. And this was a very much these were sort of working class figures who obviously became old at the time before we had the Old Age Pension Act and so on. So these people really were on their uppers in their later years. And there's also too a mound of press cuttings as well that are of equal interest as well. So here we have X marks the spot in many more ways than one. This is the book that, let's say it's MS 881, and this contains, as it says here, this contains Henry Burstow list of songs. This is in his own particular hand. This is his own particular title to it. And if you have a look at the opening page, this is what it looks like. Here you can see him listing out his particular songs, Henry Burstow list of songs, and then someone has added their songbook. No, rather someone has gone through this particular material here. You can see there's annotations as to where he's learned some of his particular material. You've got their father, you've got their, in some particular cases, from mother, and so on and so on. And so, yeah, there's clearly work to be done on this. All I can really do today is sort of present you with this particular material. I can't come to any particular conclusions as to what's really going on this particular material. So this is one of the many items of interest here, the list of songs, and you can see how it goes on here. It's no difference on the other particular pages here as well. And this is where it ends. So there's basically 19 pages in that particular manuscript that lists out the first group of songs there. And then there are some song texts here as well. There's the female smuggler and there's the oak table as well. And that's also included in this book. And you can see there's a clear distinction there between Henry Burstow's own handwriting and the person who has annotated this particular text. So I say that I think is that was a real surprise to come across that particular item. Very welcome to come across that particular item. And then, as I mentioned, the other second item, or the other second group of material, is the material that relates to the publication of the Reminiscences itself. William Albury was a calligrapher of note, so the title page, so that rather elaborate and rather beautiful title page that was done for the Reminiscences was done by him himself. And so you've got here this is sort of draft artwork here for the Reminiscences. I could say that's in Albury's hand. And this group of manuscripts has all sorts of printed ephemera in it here. You've got here, this is obviously as the book was published by subscription, and so this is the particular flyer to encourage people to sign up for a particular copy. So you can see, say Albury's, you can see the title page there, and you've got here the subscription copies, 2 shillings, post free, 2 and threepence, and so on. And proceeds for the benefit of Henry Burstow. I hasten to add the Reminiscences, the introduction is unsigned, so that there's no mention in the Reminiscences that William Albury has anything to do with it. It's only when you start to look at the ephemera as well as the material that's amongst his papers that you realize that the Reminiscences was all to do with William Elbury, and another person called Jury Clamp, wonderful first name as well. He was also involved in this as well. And so I say you've got these these various pieces of printed ephemera here, sort of soliciting people to purchase copies or sign up copies. Then you have large numbers of letters. Everyone who seems to have written in for a copy, that letter seems to have been kept. And here we have Ralph Vaughan Williams here writing in here, kindly send to the above address 2 copies of your recollections of Henry Burstow. I include 4 shillings and 2pence postage. He shorted out on the postage. It should have been 6pence for the postage by my recollection, but nevertheless, so you have a letter there from Ralph Vaughan Williams. You have a postcard here from someone involved with Frances Tolmie. Once again, a copy of it being sent to her. And then here again, this is W.H. Gill, extremely distinctive handwriting, quite apart from that he signs the letter, and it's also got his address on it as well. But once again, sort of, asking here for a copy of the book, also actually buying a copy here for Richard Sharp. This is Richard Sharp, who he gets involved in with songs of the British folk as well. I didn't realize that he actually knew him. He was just, so this is the and it also mentioned here, kind regards to Mr. Burstow. I hope to see him again ere long. So, the letter that I quoted to his cousin, that's from 1912. This letter here is from 1911. So it shows that he met him on several occasions, and clearly even before 1911. And say just moves on. This is from the editor of the Ringing World here. Sort of, she's talking about how he's going to put a puff piece into the Ringing World. And he says, "I know and have rung with Mr. Burstow." Many of these letters where people, as I say, they're subscribing for a copy or purchasing a copy, they're quite moving. There are people saying, "Oh yes, I know Henry Burstow. I met him. He, the first time I ever rang bells, he was there. He taught me how to ring bells." He does just come across as a very warm, a very engaging, and a very, very friendly character. Then, of course, we have other material here. We have there's I think there's at least just the one copy letter which is valuable to have. A copy letter here from William Albury to Lucy Broadwood, and again, they're just talking about Henry Burstow, talking about the reminiscences. William Albury passed on broadside ballads to Lucy Broadwood, and that's quite evident. So they got that, and then we also have letters here from Lucy Broadwood to William Albury as well. There's a good number. It's about not a good number. I say there's about 5 or 6 letters. I think I'll have to really tot it up. And once again, this talks about Ralph Vaughan Williams. This talks about the phonograph. This talks about about his own visits, of Ralph Vaughan Williams' own visits to Henry Burstow as well. And once again, this is remote. This letter's from 1926. So Albury and Broadwood were still in correspondence, or rather the correspondence starts up because there was talk about doing a second edition, or rather a second edition reprint, whatever, of the reminiscences, but that didn't come about. But so it's just all adds to the mix, really. Okay, say the third item we have here is the complete manuscript of the reminiscences. It's not the top or final copy as such. I mean, I was only in Horsham just for the day, so and there was much more material than I had actually expected. I thought you might just get 1 or 2 letters or just a little. I was absolutely astonished as just how much material there was. So I've only had chance to have studied, have had a brief look at this, but it seems to be very close to the final text. So there's nothing missing as such that I could see from first glance. So there's nothing extra that just didn't make it into the reminiscences. But nevertheless, as I say, it's there. And this is sort of moving away from the reminiscences side of things. This is much more looking at at Burstow himself. As I said, he fell on hard times, And there was William Albury set up a benevolent fund for him. This is what part of the reminiscences was about as well, that the income, the profit from the selling copies of the reminiscences would be passed on to Burstow. But there was also two way of individuals who were asked to subscribe to a benevolent fund to basically, what could you say? Keep Burstow alive. I don't think you can put it in, the simpler or starker terms than that as well. And so we have the account book here, which runs obviously from 1907 to 1916 when he dies, a fund raised by a few sympathisers and friends for the support of Henry Burstow, a native of Horsham, now 81 years of age. For nearly 70 years, bell ringer of Horsham Old Church, he'd always maintained an excellent character in every respect, but is now, through no fault of his own, in straitened circumstances. And so you can see, year by year here, there's obviously work to be done here on looking at the particular names to just see just who the individuals were who were subscribing to this particular fund. You can see straight away, you can see Jury Cramp's name is down there. He was the one who wrote on his behalf. You see William Albury's name is down there as well. Whole range of individuals, people putting in 10 bob, people putting in 5 bob, 2 and 6, 1 and 6, and so on. And say this runs up until 1916. You've got the last entries here are made by a Mrs. Pratt, and Mrs. Pratt must be one of his relatives, because once again we get a letter here from 1953 from Henry Pratt, who I presume is her son, who says, I'm his only surviving nephew in Horsham. And he was just reflecting here on a BBC broadcast of some of Henry Burstow's songs. And she has an autographed copy of traditional songs collected by Lucy Broadwood and presented by her to in 1908. This, I now believe, is in Horsham. I didn't have a chance to have a look at this, but I know there was a press release that's up on the web that talks about this copy coming in to the Horsham Museum. The Benevolent Fund was round up in 1916. So there's a mention here in the West Sussex County Times. One of the useful things for having the newspapers digitized as well. And so, if you want to have a look at the balance of it, this is what they got. They raised the sum of £102, 17 shillings and 8 pence, and you can see the breakdown here from the subscriptions and from the profits from the sale of the reminiscences. So, the other major item that there is present in Horsham are press clippings or press cuttings, however, whatever phraseology you want to use. There's absolute masses of them. And the great value of this, of course, is there's cuttings from newspaper titles that are not present in the British Newspaper Archive. We know not everything has been digitized, but also too, there's also clippings and cuttings from issues that are not present in the British Newspaper Archive, even though the newspaper title has been digitized. They haven't got everything. Also, too, you occasionally come across items that you can't find through searches in the British Newspaper Archive, because it searches on dirty OCR, which doesn't pick up some of these particular items. And then when you go back in, using the newspaper clipping and using other phrases in that particular clipping or cutting, you can find the item itself. So there's other material there to be sort of harvested from Albury's papers. Outside of the material that is at Horsham, I've only been able to find one item. Not that I've done a considerable amount of looking. I was a bit sort of, when I put the slide in, I thought, well, maybe I need to do a bit more looking. But I've only found sort of one item, one Albury item outside of outside of his own personal papers in Horsham. There is a letter to Lucy Broadwood that's in the Surrey History Centre amongst the Lucy Broadwood collection. And it dates from 1916. I think we don't need to read the whole letter. I think the first interest here is in the highlighting there of the first particular phrase: "I duly received your 2 letters in the folk song book. I'm very glad that the old flimsies are of use to you." By flimsy, I assume he's meaning broadside ballads. That's what he is sending on to her. Okay, so That, I say, that finishes the material that there is amongst the William Albury manuscripts, but there is another tranche of material to look at. I say that very much speaks to Burstow as the folk singer, but there is material that speaks to Burstow as the bell ringer. Bell ringing is an absolutely astonishing world. I cannot believe that there were so many magazines. I mean, these are weekly magazines: Bell News, Bell Ringer, Campanology, Church Worlds, Ringing World. These came out every week. They've all been digitized by enthusiasts in the bell ringing world. They've all been indexed as well. So if you have any of your ancestors who were bell ringers, you'll find them in here. There's no doubt about that. Now, obviously, this speaks to Burstow as the bell ringer, but nevertheless, if you're interested in his life as a bell ringer and the life of other bell ringers in this particular period, to sort of round out this portrait of Burstow, it's the place to look. But occasional items do pop up that are of interest. Quite apart from, say, that photograph from Bell News from 1891, there's an interview with him. I mean, some of these, because he was such a prominent bell ringer, there are interviews with him as well, which are fascinating. But this just pops up. This is from 1904, so this shows you before that other fund that was established in 1907, there'd been an earlier attempt to create a benevolent fund for him. So, this is the particular value of the newspapers being digitized, and also these particular other resources being digitized as well. Okay, I think that's me. I think I've spoken maybe a bit too long or a bit too quick. I don't know, but this is going to be my particular final slide. Henry Burstow must be the only folk singer who has made contact with us from beyond the grave. This is a remarkable account here from. So once again, this is the newspapers. This is absolutely fantastic. The Mid Sussex Times here. Our readers, and we all know they are not a few, who give consideration to psychic matters will find interest in the following remarkable statement from the pen of Mr. Tom Charman, especially as he writes about Henry Burstow, when alive, had many acquaintances in Mid Sussex. Tom Charman, as I say, was a psychic. And we know that Henry Burstow was an atheist, although he was a bell ringer and went to church every Sunday to ring the bells. He never took part in the service. And so there was sort of, Tom Charman said to him, well, maybe there is an afterlife. And Henry Burstow apparently said, well, if there's an afterlife, I will send you word that there is indeed an afterlife. And then as he goes on to recount here, I was sitting with my sister and a friend at tea in a New Forest village one summer afternoon. The friend was a normal clairvoyant. We were discussing every sort of mundane subject, but suddenly my friend said that a spirit friend had just entered the room saying, well, here I am. And that spirit was indeed Henry Burstow. So I think this is my final slide. I will end here. I mean, what a moment to end on here. So I think if you ever need a slot for a speaker, perhaps we could sort of, call up Henry Burstow, or perhaps we're going to need a new round number for sort of songs literally from beyond the grave. Okay, thank you for that. I hope that's been of some interest to you, or maybe a lot of interest to you. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. That was wonderful. It was certainly of interest, certainly to me, because he's one of my favourites, Henry Burstow. And obviously we all greatly regret that the phonograph recordings that he made for Lucy Broadwood haven't survived, as far as we know. Maybe I'm a bit puzzled, and Stephen, I was hoping you'd explain this to me. I once went to Horsham Museum and there was a display, and I distinctly remember a handwritten song text which was labelled Henry Burstow manuscript. I'm sure it was in red ink. And so I thought I'll come back and look at that. So I wrote to them probably about 2 years later, said I want to come and see the Henry Burstow papers, and they said we don't have any. And that's because they were in the Albury papers. I now realise that. But you don't seem to have picked up on this song text
No, I haven't. I mean, I say the hand list goes down to item level, so I will have a look at the hand list. I mean, I mean to go back there because I was just there by chance because I was at Guildford for the Early Recording Association conference, and I was flying to the Isle of Man from Gatwick, and so it was just the obvious way in Guildford to Horsham, and then because it is an evening flight, so I was astonished at how much material there was. But I can't recall coming across anything in Burstow's hand. Yeah.
Well, it's possible it wasn't his hand, but I'm sure that's what the label said. And it was a separate sheet of paper. It wasn't in a notebook or anything. I'm clear on that in my head.
It's well, you wonder if it actually has drifted into another collection.
Well, it may be, yes. And one other thing to say about newspapers, local newspapers online. Remember that a lot of local newspapers had different editions. They would have, even though they were a weekly paper, they would have one on Monday and another edition on Thursday with the same stuff in it, except some of it was different. And always the microfilms that they now use online were of the first edition. And so, I mean, I've got articles that I know were in a newspaper, and I've looked at the newspaper and it's not there. It's because sometimes there is an evening and a morning edition as well of regional papers. So that's one of the things we have to contend with when we're doing these online searches. Even things that we are sure are there don't appear online. You always have to go back to the original if anybody's still got them. Anyway, and your idea of songs from the grave, I think we should follow that up. If we have any clairvoyants in the audience, please get in contact. Anybody else want to? Sorry, I'm wittering on. Anybody else want to say anything?
Just comment on your thoughts.
Oh, Martin's got his hand up. You're muted, Martin.
I'm not now.
Not now.
Stephen, we may have talked about this before, but I can't remember where I read it now. I thought it was Lucy Broadwood, reported that a gentleman had visited Henry Burstow and noted down his entire repertoire. Do we have any clues as to who that might have been?
Well, I wouldn't say his entire repertoire, but certainly Gill did. You know, Gill did note material from him, but of course, Gill's collection is lost. I mean, yeah, as I mentioned before. So, yeah, I would think. I mean, you know, rather than multiplying suspects, we certainly know that Gill visited him on more than one particular occasion. So I think you point the finger at Gill.
That was who I had my finger pointed at, but no evidence, as you say.
Did Gill was the one who did Songs of the British Folk or something like that?
Yes, that's him because that's how he gets involved with Richard Sharp. And I didn't realize, you know, because Richard Sharp's mentioned in that book, but I didn't realize that he sort of knew him, if that makes sense. I mean, because that letter, he's actually asking for 2 copies of the reminiscences, one for himself and one from Richard Sharp. And Richard Sharp is living in East Preston, which is just down the road from Angmering.
Have you seen it? Going from memory in Vaughan Williams Library, whatever it's called.
Yeah,
the copy of Gill's book where Lucy Broadwood has written and said that he's stolen things from her book. Is that right?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Gill is a difficult character to deal with.
But that was specifically the Burstow. I mean, Lucy's obviously cross with him about something to do with Burstow. Yeah.
Well, there is one. I'll dig that letter out for you because I'd say this talk's been useful to make me come back to this particular material. I was just there for that day, looked at it, and I've worked on other things since. There is a mention in that letter about other people, and now this for Martin as well, of other people turning up to Burstow. So I think there's a sense of a proprietorship there that, you know, Burstow is my singer, and these other people should not be turning up and exhausting him. I'll dig that letter out now, and I'll pass it on to the pair of you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And of course, Gordon Hall, because he lived in Horsham, near Horsham,
Yeah.
also did a lot of work on Henry Burstow, but I don't know if his notes have survived. I haven't seen them. But I remember him showing me a picture of Burstow's house that he had found. So there's more to be found out.
More will be revealed.
Well, indeed, with a Ouija board, if nothing else. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to Stephen and to Martin for today's papers. And as I say, we might see you on the 14th of June. So if anybody's got anything to suggest or contribute to a meeting on the 14th of June, please get in touch. If not, we'll see you either at Whitby or in Leeds. Thanks all for coming.